The administration would feel about a trial in Chicago or Springfield, Illinois, instead of somewhere else.
I don't know what is driving the president on this. Maybe he doesn't want to have to sign the death warrants as he does in a military court, but doesn't have to in a civilian court. I'm not sure why they're so insistent on treating these people as civilian criminals.
Isn't it just international public relations, Congressman?
It might be. I think, we need to get over that. We're at war. Al-Qaeda's declared war on us. They're serious about this. Look what they've done, and they still intend to do. And we need to get as much intelligence to protect the American people as we can from them.
Mm-hmm. Moving on for a second, talking about the Middle East and talking about the president. The president did something that was unprecedented recently. He came to the U.S. House GOP conference meeting just the other week. And that was all televised on C-SPAN, so the general public could see that, and Laura and I saw portions of that. And it looked like the British Parliament. It looked like question period. Here, the loyal opposition, the Republican House members, were able to ask direct questions to the president, and he couldn't duck them. You were there.
I was there.
What was your impression of this unprecedented gathering?
Well, we invited him. It was our annual GOP conference retreat where we all gather once a year, talk about the year ahead. So we invited him, and we asked that it be made public so the public could hear the questions and answers. I thought it was more of a standoff. He's got the mic a little bit more. I don't think that some of the guys who asked questions perhaps did as well as they should have. They maybe tried to speak a little bit before they asked their questions. I like give and take questions and answers. And we will invite him back. He came last year to our conference at our invitation. I think that's a good, healthy thing to have that kind of debate and then let people check the facts on the answers. I think it's a good thing.
Well, he mentioned in his State of the Union address that he's very interested in keeping those types of dialogues open. So at least he's not just saying that.
That's what he says.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to inviting us in the room and sitting at the table or having our leaders to the White House for the past year, he hasn't had a very good record. And he hasn't insisted that the leaders let us at the table when you're talking about issues. We showed him we have over 40 alternatives, bills, when they've been calling us a party of no with no alternatives. And we can discuss them all. And he needs to encourage the leadership of the House and Senate, Pelosi and Reid, to let us be at the table and start with our alternatives and discuss, as options, not try to bring in 2 or 3 people at the last minute, buy them off for their vote and call that bipartisanship. It should start in the beginning of the process.
Okay, well, we want to thank you very much for joining us today, Congressman.
My pleasure.
It'll be a real interesting development if, in fact, the president does come to the House GOP conference again, and that's televised. We'd love to see that institutionalized. That was you guys asked tough questions and
put them on C-SPAN.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We hope to have you back soon.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back with the next segment of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by PAConstructionJobs.com, where you can look for job openings, post a resume, or learn more about a rewarding career in Pennsylvania's highway construction industry. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. By Weber Incorporated, a leading manufacturer of hardwood lumber and wood products. The Highway Equipment and Supply Company, Central and Northeast Pennsylvania's authorized distributor for premier construction equipment manufacturers. And the American Home Bank, a nationally chartered and FDIC insured yet locally owned and operated bank in central Pennsylvania. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States.
Today, we're filming on location in Lancaster County. We're at the corporate headquarters of American Home Bank, and we're here to talk about the banking industry in the United States and in Pennsylvania. Of course, what has transpired over the last year with the bailouts and all the news regarding our financial institutions has generated lots of questions in the minds of many of our viewers, and we thought that we would tap into the expertise of one of the top people in the Commonwealth to explain this situation to us. And we've asked Jim Deitch, who is the CEO of American Home Bank, to join us. Jim, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Jim, how would you portray the financial bailouts that have occurred during the last year? Have they been successful? Have they accomplished their mission?
I think the bailouts, from one respect, have been successful in that they restored both consumer and industry confidence into the banking system, and the federal government provided a backstop to essentially say that the banking system is safe. So from that perspective, it's been successful. From the distortions that some of these bailouts have brought into the financial system, I'm not so sure I'd characterize it as totally successful.
Mm-hmm. How would you explain a distortion? What do you have in mind?
Well, one of the things that originally the bailouts started as capital infusions into healthy banks. And the intent was to provide both consumers and the industry that uses banks with the confidence that the capital would be there and these banks would all be well capitalized.
Yes.
It then really transmutated into a bailout for some pretty unhealthy banks, and then turned into a stress test to try to measure the health of these banks. And in the end, I think that created some consumer confusion, particularly with respect to, well, really, who is healthy and was there a bailout? The fact is the vast majority of banks in the United States, and particularly community banks, are extremely healthy, are doing well, and continue to serve both consumer and businesses to provide credit into the system.
And that's what we had heard over and over again, that the community banking system and smaller banks were just doing business as normal, and were not affected by this. Of course, there were a whole series of new regulations that were also passed and put into place in regard to what had occurred. Have those regulations worked well, or have they had a opposite, perhaps, effect of what was hoped for?
Well, I think just to jump back to the health of the banking system and the community banks, there's no doubt that some of the difficulties in the housing market and those difficulties have then come into the overall business market, and particularly commercial real estate. Many banks are experiencing a degree of stress with respect to loan portfolios not performing and defaults from both the consumer and from the business side. But nonetheless, the capital levels of banks are still fairly strong, and if you look at the level of profitability reported by the banking system for the year just ended, it's not the levels it was in 2007 and 2008, but the net revenue from the banking system, and particularly the community bank segment, is still pretty good.
Well, talking about the housing market and foreclosures, you find that are those foreclosures continuing? Do we still have a problem with foreclosures, Jim?
Well, the foreclosure levels in the U.S. are at extremely high levels, and they represent a pretty big drag on the real estate market. One of the things the Obama administration has attempted to do is, through a series of modifications of loans, to try and, quote, save some of the people that otherwise would face foreclosure. What the fact of the matter is that many of these loan modifications ultimately don't work, and that property continues in the foreclosure process. Depending on the program, the number of loans that have been modified that have ultimately gone back into foreclosure is between 30 and 60%. So I would not call that a successful system.